Kenny.
John Ossoff.
Amen.
I was bumping that little baby. He just released a song called "The Bigger Picture," and I often have a conversation with my sons. I have a 19 and 16-year-old, and I often have a rap conversation about who the GOAT is, who the greatest of all time is. And of course, my era, you have so many. You have Jay-Z, you have Biggie, you have Nas. But my oldest son, Kenny Burns, who just got into Kennesaw State
I saw
University,
that.
yeah, he'll be playing basketball there. He swears that little baby is the GOAT. And I'm like, well, Kenny, I mean, I do really like his music. I mean, I'm a trap rapper fan, but I never heard anything conscious until The Bigger Picture. And that's why I wanted to play it for you, because he is spitting some bars on that song. How are you, John Ossoff?
I'm doing well, Kenny. Thank you for having me. And yeah, my team let me know that you were going to open with that, so I had a chance to look at the lyrics real quick before I came on, and they did look conscious and relevant and timely.
Yeah, and
So
I had no idea you were so young. And I was like, because I talked to Steven yesterday, and I like to open my show with the song that, speaks to the person I'm talking to, right? And he was like, play Rosa Parks by Outkast. He likes Outkast. I'm thinking you're older, slightly, not obviously as old as I am. But then when I was reading all this stuff about you, I'm like, wait, no, I want to put him with Baby and make sure he has the first time voters in pocket. So that was my goal with that. And hopefully they'll lock in with you as well.
well, I appreciate it. And congrats to your son. I know he's going to be playing ball at KSU. That's a big deal. So congratulations to him for making that commitment, and to you for getting through that phase of everything. I know it's a big relief. And yeah, I was out, Kenny, yesterday at the state capitol here, the
Yeah.
Georgia NAACP, which is led by a charismatic young leader, Reverend James Woodall, an Army veteran. Led a march from the federal building downtown to the Capitol, and there were a lot of young people. Man, it was mostly young people. It was multiracial. It was really inspiring. Thousands of people out on a Monday morning. So, and
No,
everyone, maintaining distance and wearing masks and being health conscious as well.
No, I see you on the front line, and I want to start off by saying, first of all, congratulations. I want to cheers you with the little 1884. You are on the front line. You are doing the work. As I begin to frame you today on the Kenny Burns Show, a lot of people who don't know you will see just how active you're getting behind the scenes with your company. And, just it's refreshing to see someone so young, active, and on the front line. So I want to cheers to you. Hopefully you got your bottle of 1884 that I sent you.
I did receive the gift, and yeah, most grateful. I appreciate that. Stephen brought it over, so thank you for the
Awesome.
bottle.
Well, I want to take people on a trip. I want them to get to know you. We obviously have to talk politics because that's what you are into. You're running for the Senate here in Georgia.
Yeah.
You're an 80s baby, though. I want to start out by saluting the 80s babies. I don't know if you watched the Kenny Burns Show, but I've had Lena Waithe. I've had several 80s babies that are doing phenomenal things in their respective fields. And I want to salute you for that, because I think the 80s babies are going to change the world. So that's
Appreciate that.
Didn't know you grew up in North Lake. You grew up in North Lake. And in high school, you actually interned for the Honorable legendary John Lewis. How was that? How did you get to that moment with John?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fulton and DeKalb counties, and in the North Lake area in DeKalb. And when I was a high school student, I took a really keen interest in history. That was sort of my first love, was history. I loved history class. I loved reading history in my own time. This was also right around the time when the Iraq War was kicking off. And that started to open my consciousness a bit in terms of the intersection between politics and history.
Okay.
And so I started reading and trying to educate myself about political history and American history. And I read John Lewis' memoir, Walking with the Wind, about his time as a young man, one of the key leaders in the civil rights movement. And I found his story so powerful that I wrote him a letter asking if I could come and learn at his feet. And he offered me the opportunity to spend a couple of months working in his Washington office. And that was really my first experience of politics or government. But one of the things that really stuck with me about that was that, you know, this is a legendary, powerful, important guy. He didn't have to take any time to mentor me or take me under his wing, but he did. He really understood that the young people coming up in his office were trying to go places themselves and that he could shape them. And he became a mentor to me, and he's been a mentor to me for the last 17 years. And I often, you know, it's sort of like the cheat code for me if I can't figure out what I should do in some situation, be it political or even honestly sometimes personal, is just what would John Lewis do? And that helps me orient myself, because he's known as the conscience of the Congress. His moral character is so unimpeachable. And I wouldn't be running without his encouragement and support.
Is that how you got to Georgetown University?
Well, I arrived at Georgetown a couple of years later. So I was still a high school student when I first worked for Congressman Lewis. Okay. But that got me so interested in public affairs and government and public policy, and I continued to be interested in history. I thought I wanted to go into diplomacy. So that's why I applied to Georgetown, was they have a school of foreign service there that trains a lot of diplomats. So I thought I was headed in that direction. Then it just so happened that I wound up showing up at the office of then DeKalb County Commissioner Hank Johnson at Congressman Lewis' encouragement. Congressman Lewis kind of sent me as help to help Hank Johnson's congressional campaign in 2006 when I was still at Georgetown.
Right.
And I wound up, you know, rising to a somewhat senior role in that campaign because they were short on folks and I could write and so on. And that led me eventually to take a position in his office. So that's how I wound up working as a legislative aide for Congressman Johnson.
So the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. So as you got to Georgetown, this sounds like you're about to go into the CIA. Like as I was kind of reading, like whom, you know, because I mean, you were Madeleine Albright, you studied in one of her classes. Former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren, like you had some really interesting teachers while you were there. So foreign services, that set you up, because I know your business, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But in 2013, obviously you started as a partner, managing partner and CEO at your company. Is that kind of how you connected the dots?
Yeah, I mean, it's all rooted in the same interests, right? International affairs, what's happening in the world, decisions that are being made for us by powerful people, and what role we play in shaping those decisions. All of that, I think, links international affairs, diplomacy, politics, journalism. And the School of Foreign Service was created to train diplomats. So I went there thinking I was going to take that path. The path that I took wound up being a little different. And yeah, it led me ultimately to international investigative journalism, which is what I've done for the last 7 years, as you were alluding to.
Yeah, Insights TWR. This made you hella interesting. I, you know, obviously had, you know, gotten several phone calls. I had put this list of candidates. I think I got everyone right but you. But you now have my 1 million percent support. But it was ironic because I'm reading and I'm like, wait, so I'm watching this video on your site about the Ebola disease. And myself, John, we'll get into this, but I'm a conspiracy theorist on a lot of levels. I look at like what you're doing with Insights TWI, and I'm like, whoa, he's like really aggressively going after, like, you know, I mean, from sex trafficking to, I mean, you have so many different things that you're being, tell me about the company, and then I'll give you some of my conspiracy theories.
Okay, ready for them. So we produce investigative video journalism for international news media. We produce undercover anti-corruption and anti-organized crime investigations. We produce frontline conflict reports. We are known for working closely with and putting front and center on camera local investigative journalists. These are the folks who typically do all of the work before some journalist parachutes in from New York or Washington and takes all the credit. We put them on camera. We created and produced the first ever internationally broadcast docu-series. It's called Africa Investigates, exclusively featuring African reporters. We've done the same thing in Latin America. And we tend to focus on high-level organized crime and corruption investigations. So for example, our team conducted a 2-year undercover investigation of corruption in international sports that caught a World Cup referee taking bribes, a senior FIFA official taking bribes,
Wait,
dozens of other soccer.
Was that the FIFA thing that the guy was living here in Atlanta?
So this was the guy who was scheduled to ref at the World Cup, who got caught on secret camera taking bribes, and then the member of the FIFA council who was caught taking like $60,000 in cash and soliciting $13 million in bribes for Ghanaian infrastructure projects. That was a wild story. But, you know, we produced in the last few years multiple investigations of ISIS war crimes. We've produced undercover investigations of human trafficking, contract killers, and this criminality and corruption all over the world. And then we sell that content to international news media on international television content markets. So what I love about what I do is that we hold people accountable when they believe they are getting away with something they know to be wrong behind the shroud of secrecy, whether they are selling and enslaving human beings or killing for money or committing crimes against humanity or stealing from the public. There is something profoundly powerful and uplifting about exposing that and showing to the public what they're doing and holding them accountable. And to be honest with you, that's the same impulse that has pulled me into the political arena at this moment.
I was about to say, when is your documentary coming out on Trump? It sounds eerie. It's so eerie. I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. It's just what you're good at, what your business is, really needs to be in the political space. This is, you know, when I read these things and I saw some of these videos, John, I really was mesmerized because I'm like, yo, he's really putting his life on the line. Like when you get into disrupting those types of, you know, syndicates and organizations and crime bosses and this, that, and the third, you get into a whole nother space of, you know, of danger. And I don't know, like you seem like the break. That's why I said CIA was like a whole thing. When I started reading like the levels of education and where you went and how you started moving around, then you formed your companies, which is a UK-based company. So I'm like, is he like 007 or something? Like you just have this unique.
You know who is like 007 is, and people should look this up, is my colleague Anas Arameo Anas. This is a Ghanaian undercover journalist that I've worked with for years, who never shows his face in public, who spent months undercover as a patient in a psychiatric hospital to expose the treatment of patients. He spent months in one of Ghana's most notorious prisons, posing as an inmate, secretly filming the conditions in this prison. He's done a lot of high-level international work. And, you know, I mean, it's using.
How did you find him? How did you find him, John? Like, that doesn't, you know what I'm saying?
So he actually worked with my company even before I did. Wow. He's worked with, so Insight was founded in 1991 by an ex-BBC reporter. And I took over as CEO in 2013.
Right.
And Insight and Anas have been working together since 2008, 2009. But he's a great friend of mine. And to your point about the level of risk, it's not me who's taking the risk. It's the journalists in the field. And they often are working with a serious threat of retaliation. We lost a colleague last year, Ahmed Hussein Swaleh, may he rest in peace, a very brave Ghanaian journalist who was one of the lead undercover reporters on the international soccer story. And people who were exposed by that investigation, you know, it was run internationally on the BBC. Every newspaper in the world was writing about it. They took their revenge, and right. You know, we went to great lengths to try to keep him safe. But it is work that journalists all over the world and journalists here in America increasingly are doing at great personal risk. You saw the number of attacks on reporters and the press during all the recent protests. So, you know, there was a time, I think, when the U.S. stood much more forcefully for press freedom. But this president has so demonized the press, and that gives license to folks around the world who want to attack him physically.
So I just, you know, I'm glad you brought up crimes against humanity. You brought up this president, this presidency, this regime. I'm 47 years old. I've never seen in my lifetime the outward racism as I do now. I feel like I've experienced it. I've always known it was there, but I just feel like this president, and even with his remarks this morning, I mean, he did this press conference talking about how he was going to put measures in the police force and that we were going to crack down on the bad apples and this, that, and the third, only to go and do what Donald Trump does and talk over the good shit. Like he said something great. Finally, I'm going to. And I don't believe anything he says, by the way, but he says he's going to do something. And then he doubles down on the bullshit. So where are we as a nation? John, I feel like you're young. You have vision for the America we all want it to be. What do we do about this old regime of bigoted and racist and even classist thinking?
Yeah, big question. Where are we as a nation? I mean, I think it is helpful to zoom out. Right, and take a broad aspect to answer that question. And you have to answer the question, I think, how do we get here? We have to understand where we're coming from to know where we're going. We have to know how these circumstances arose to understand how to remedy them. And talking about the work that my company does fighting corruption, I think that corruption in American politics is a crisis. And in many ways has brought us to this point. Something like Donald Trump only grows out of soil that's already been poisoned. Donald Trump is in many ways a symptom of deeper corruption. And I don't know what it means when you bring Mr. Smith in, but I like it. It means he's not.
This is my bobblehead. This means I'm agreeing with what you're saying and I'm feeling the message.
Okay, good.
This is my 35th birthday invitation. It's me. I had hair at one point.
I got you.
Yeah. And I'll bring when you start sounding presidential, I'm going to hit you with this one.
Okay, I like it.
Come on.
So how do we get here? Our government over decades has become increasingly captured by a small number of powerful industries, right? You have banks, defense contractors, oil and gas industry. Basically, the largest trade groups and the most powerful companies are able to use their financial resources to bend public policy to their will by buying political influence and then also by progressively eroding campaign finance laws so that they can buy more and more political influence. This has sort of two simultaneous effects. One is that these companies and industries concentrate more and more and more wealth. The other is that because they're using that wealth to rewrite the rules, they're enhancing their ability to buy power and influence with that wealth.
Right.
What does that result in? It results in an international trade system where the productive enterprises go to places without strong environmental and labor laws. American workers lose their jobs. We have widespread unemployment, dissatisfaction, underemployment. It means health insurance companies and drug companies write the rules so that although we have the wealth and the resources to ensure every American has great health care, we don't. And although we have the wealth and the resources to ensure everyone can afford the medicine they need, they can't. It means that polluters have been able to write the rules so they can destroy clean air and clean water at will. And it means that ordinary American people from all walks of life, and particularly folks whose middle class livelihood depended on that strong industrial and manufacturing base, have seen that way of life evaporate, while folks in Manhattan and on Wall Street and people who, like my opponent, Senator David Perdue, who was a CEO who bragged under oath about how he made his fortune sending American jobs overseas, exploiting this exact system to enrich his shareholders at the expense of the people. I say all that to say that has laid the foundations for a social and political crisis. Because faith in our institutions and our government is at such a low ebb because of all this corruption that is visible to people on the left and on the right who are having different reactions to it. But it's widely known by the public that politicians don't work for them, and therefore the government doesn't work for them either. And if we want to zoom in and see how that still plays out, just look at the COVID-19 response. You've had trillions of dollars of instantaneous support for Wall Street banks and major corporate borrowers. The Fed just launched another major corporate bond buying program today, but it was like pulling teeth to get $1,200 for ordinary people.
Facts.
By the way, something else that my opponent, Senator Perdue, said he opposed, a single $1,200 check to help people out at COVID-19, when he has no problem with all of this subsidy going to organized power and concentrated industry. So,
and while he also is doubling down on pharmaceutical companies that are making him money, which is, what's that called? Insider trading?
Yeah, we didn't even get to that, right? I mean, you talk about like spitting in the face of the people who pay your salary and elect you. You have basically one core job, right? To keep this country safe, to protect it from threats that the government sees. And here, the president and your party, I'm talking about my opponent, Senator Perdue, dismissing COVID-19, saying it's going to go away like a miracle, not lifting a finger to do anything about it, while you're trading medical stocks, buying vaccine stocks, dumping your casino shares. I mean, it's really outrageous, and everyone sees it and knows it. And that's not the kind of thing that you can even persuade your most diehard followers to support. I mean, that is why I'm already ahead of him in so many public polls, even though the general election has just gotten started.
Well, I know I want to say this too, and I think another reason why you are in this lead is because you're present. I don't want you to pop. You did a political move on me, and I like the way you did it because you had to. But I think because you're so young and intelligent, and I believe you. See, I don't believe many people, but I believe you. I need you to address part of the question that you left out. And this is the most important part of your election, is the race component in the world. Well, America, obviously, and Georgia specifically, because that's the state you're running for. But that has to be top of mind for you, John. You have to make everyone comfortable in this process, which you are doing. And this is why I don't want you to skip this moment to address that, because acknowledging that there is a race problem as a white man gives us the comfortability to go to these polls and know, because speaking out right now, I've never seen, I mean, Dr. King, John Lewis, they did marches. I saw white people. I've never seen this many white people hand in hand with black people marching and protesting in the way that they are. And I want to believe, and I believe that you are a product of that, John. So I don't want you to dance around that one thing. I need you to just please say.
Yeah, and Kenny, not dancing at all, and happy to talk through it directly. And
you see who's out, John. You see who's out.
I see who's out. I see who's out.
I believe in you.
Look, we, and when I say we, I mean Americans, Georgians, and people who are trying to lead in public have to be able to speak directly and candidly and honestly about race.
Come on.
And about racism. And that doesn't mean saying what I think anyone else wants to hear. That means speaking from the heart. It also means I try to be plain spoken, talking about race. You know, I mean, the truth of the matter is, and you're media savvy, Kenny, so you get this. When you're running a political campaign, you're trying to reach millions and millions of people. A big part of how you do that is what you put in your advertising on TV and radio. Yeah. And I closed out that campaign in this primary very plain spokenly saying that when a young black man in Georgia is shot dead in the street and police and prosecutors look the other way, that's the worst kind of corruption. And that's why I've been speaking everywhere I go about the need for a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act to secure equal justice for all Americans and to secure voting rights for all Americans. And I'm taking flack for it, which is amazing.
Fuck them.
I've been.
Fuck them, John. Fuck them.
Look,
we got you, John.
But I just want to point out how amazing it is that here in 2020, with everything that's going on in the world and all of the evidence before our eyes, I was on Rashad Ritchie's show on WAOK last week.
I heard it.
talking about how, just like, by the way, the same thing that Joe Biden has been saying, that federal aid for local law enforcement should depend upon whether local law enforcement is upholding the basic civil and human rights of the folks they're meant to protect and serve. And Senator Perdue is trying to hit me on that. My question for Senator Perdue is, do you believe otherwise? Do you believe, Senator, that federal aid should go to departments that have a demonstrated record of police brutality or of racism in law enforcement?
Come on.
I would like to hear him answer that question. I would like to hear where David Perdue has been on any of this for the last 6 years. But returning to the central question that you raised, let's have that. Let's have many discussions about race in America and what it means today and what it means for a white politician to be running in an environment that's this racially charged. What I hear
in
a lot of white
in a state, though, John, that is notorious for racism, by the way.
Well, look, it's been if we need any evidence to take to the rest of the country of the need for a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act, just look at what's happened in Georgia in the last 3 months, between the killing of Ahmaud Arbery and the refusal of local police and prosecutors to pursue it. By the way, that prosecutor over there in Brunswick was appointed by the Perdue boys, the one who didn't lift a finger. And what we saw last week on Tuesday, which was an absolute disgrace, where we had countless people, most of them Black, being disenfranchised because of decisions made by the folks who run this state. So yeah, Georgia demonstrates why we need a new Civil Rights Act and a new Voting Rights Act. I'll also tell you, and I hope this is encouraging, that despite all that intense voter suppression, last week we had record Democratic turnout in that primary, for the first time exceeding Republican ballots cast. And this state is in a state of transition.
Yeah.
Over to you.
But I think, John, and not to interrupt, but I'm feeling your energy right now. I think that, to your point of the voter suppression that happened, because it was clear and blatant, they can't stop us in numbers. It's too many people. If you can galvanize and mobilize people to go to the polls, it doesn't matter what they try to do, because I think it's too many people for people like you to lose. But I do want to say this, I have friends in Atlanta, white friends, that when Donald Trump got elected, things went left. And I'm speaking for a lot of people that I know. The line in the sand has been drawn. And as much as, I'm the type of person, I've never met you a day in my life. I'm greeting you with love and support, because what I've seen of you, the way that your camp has communicated with me, I know for a fact that you're about change. But we have to draw a line in the sand. And even when you get into the political things that you have to say, or the things that you want to stick by, I think in layman's terms, sometimes the real John and the way that he feels, and this goes for other politicians in other fields and what they're running for, I think that you have to speak in layman's terms. Sometimes, I had this conversation with Sean King, Angela Rye, Killer Mike, See the God, all on my show. I'm like, y'all all are smart than a motherfucker. I said, but sometimes you talk over people's heads. And that's why, like, when I speak to people, people love the way that I frame culture, because I'm speaking in layman's terms. One, racism, I don't even believe that my children are experiencing this in their lifetime. It baffles me. So I'm glad you addressed that in the ways that we can go forth and battle that. My other thing is systematically, when you look at, systemic racism, I'm sorry, when you look at like healthcare and COVID, how we're so disproportionate in opportunity to get healthcare, real healthcare. I'm talking about across the board, not just with cancer and anything else that are detrimental to one's body. These are the things that people wake up and pay attention to, and I just, I want, and I'm not saying you aren't doing this, but I'm just encouraging you as your new big brother from another mother. I want to see you win, because you're not only thoughtful, you're in the mix. And because your background is corruption, this is some shit we got to tear down, John. Like, this government that exists today has to be rebuilt from the ground up. And another thing, and I mean that in the most respectful, thoughtful, considerate way. I don't mean that and go burn it down. I don't think we are equipped to burn it down, because that would be an option in a real revolution. But I am saying to you, with people your age, people with your commitment, people with your passion. You guys can do it, John. It's gonna, you know, these 200 judges, and I want to know your opinion on this. These 200 plus judges that the Trump administration will have put in, you know, federal courts, right? That shit could be crazy for Black and brown people, John, like going forward. I mean, if you look at the disparities, I mean, even the memes, I don't believe all the memes, but I see one that's consistent where this white young man got locked up for armed robbery, a Black man got locked up for armed robbery. One got 2 years, the other got 26. This shit is for real, John. And these are the things that are breaking up these Black families. And I'm not saying anywhere on this show or would ever say that people that do the crime shouldn't do the time, but someone getting 2 years for the same crime, getting 26 years for the same, bro, we have to fix that. So I want to know your opinion on that, because I think those judges, it's going to be a lot of repealing on that, bro, or trying to.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is pervasive racism and classism in criminal justice in America at every stage, from policing to prosecution to sentencing to conditions of incarceration as well once someone is sentenced. And I also think that there's unprecedented, broad understanding of that. I mean, I do think that we need to look at this moment as a moment when it's possible to craft a broad consensus that we need reform, that we need, for example, a new Civil Rights Act. Because the Constitution, as amended, as it stands, guarantees equal protection under the law, just like it guarantees the right to vote. Neither of those things in practice are real in America.
Facts.
There is not
John,
equal protection under the law in America.
But yeah. they're not honoring their own word, and they never do. And that's my point. But finish. Go ahead. I have another thing coming up.
No, you're good. I mean, I
just get concerned because, again, people like you and people like you, really, you will have the wherewithal and the power to really change things. And unless we call these people out for what it is, like you just said about Purdue, I wonder if he this, that, and the third. I wonder if that motherfucker has Black friends. I wonder when the last time somebody he knows was around Black people. I mean, I'm not saying that Black people don't work for him. I'm not saying Black people don't work around him. I'm just saying there's a disconnect, John. And there's people like you that want to know what that disconnect is. We need more people like you. And I'm just passionate because I really feel like this isn't the first stop for you. I really feel like you have the wherewithal to reach the main house, right? I think you could do that. And I don't know if that's in your plans or goals, but these are the things. This is how you win the people, bro. I'm going off.
Here's what I'll tell you. I'm just here to be myself with you. And the commitment that I make is that when I represent Georgia in the U.S. Senate, I will come right back here and have this conversation with you. You can ask me anything you want, and I'll answer you with what's real from my heart. And I'm not going to try to say something that I think earns your approval for its own sake. I'm going to explain myself and my views and my actions on your behalf exactly as I see them. And I'm always open for criticism, interrogation, scrutiny, because that is what a public servant is meant to do, is to act on their conscience and then open themselves up for scrutiny and criticism. And I am on message in attacking my opponent, but also for real, this is a guy who hasn't held a public town hall meeting in 5 years. But you know what you can do if you want to get a meeting? Let me just, Kenny, this is an important point. If you want to get a meeting with Senator Perdue, you can cut him a $7,500 corporate PAC check, then you get 4 meetings a year. I mean, he puts it in writing. It's just the corruption is out of control and it's systemic. Anyway, you had something you want to say.
No, I think he's been acting that way. He hasn't done a public, appearance at these town halls because his man's in office and they're running amok, doing whatever they want to do. I look at like the state of politics. Politics is new for even me, right? I've been voting since obviously Obama, but never was really concerned locally, statewise. I never really knew the importance and why. I mean, because I was a convicted felon at 18 years old. I, changed my entire life around. I've been married 21 years. I have a 19 and 16-year-old. I helped build the entertainment fabric that Atlanta is today. And that's a clear, example of how these Black and brown babies can be inspired and go forth and do great things in life. And I just feel like the state of politics for Black people is that they don't care about our vote. To your point of the Constitution, how we're supposed to have voting rights, and we're supposed to have these things according to this paper that you quote on. I mean, these fearless political leaders live by, but we don't get that. And I think, John, I really want to say this, man. I feel like, and this is where I go left, and you can reel me in, but I feel like, you watch the Hunger Games, you watch Mad Max, you watch all these movies over the years where they have this sect of people, and this is where classism comes in play, and I think racism goes out the door, because I think, honestly, the racist mentality is dying. I think the old bigoted people that really try to keep that going, I think it's dying. It's too much crossbreeding. There's too many people like you that understand. There's too many of us that aren't looking at everything so angrily, and they're all white people are bad. Like, that's changing. I think classism, however, trumps everything. It's the haves and have-nots. But if we really get to that state, it's a bubble where everything inside is great, the water's clean, and everybody outside is fighting. And those are the things that I fear for my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And I'm the first generation money over here, John. And I want several generations to be able to benefit from this. I don't want it to just be all of a sudden martial law and then this, that, and the third, and things go crazy. I want them to have a real chance. And I guess you feel me, but I just wanted to say that because that's important.
I mean, yeah, you first of all, I think that you're right that in that the course that we're on, there are some folks I think would like the world to be either like a first class airport lounge or a favela, right? With like nothing in between. And that is the direction that we're headed, given the increase in inequality. And that also reflects what I was saying earlier, trying to diagnose the problem. That when money buys policy-making power, then the policies that are purchased enhance the money and enhance the power you get from the money. And that's the vicious cycle that's been going on in America for decades. But I also think your point about class and race is important in a Southern context and in a Georgia context, because the Republican Party's strategy since Nixon, the Southern strategy, has been to divide Southerners along racial and cultural lines. And what that does is it prevents a broader coalition with shared economic interests from emerging, because there are struggling white folks and struggling Black folks in Georgia and across the South, and their interests are aligned. Poor white folks and poor Black folks both benefit if every single citizen has great health care. Poor folks of all races benefit when we raise the minimum wage, when we create jobs with a big infrastructure and public works program, when we stop the destruction of our clean air and clean water, because that dumping and that pipeline is going to run through poor neighborhoods, be they white or Black or Native or anything else. In order for us to win, we have to unite a broad coalition of people who have shared economic interests, despite a political environment that is calculated to divide people along racial and cultural lines. And we have to do that while also rightly pointing out real inequities and disparities in outcomes along racial lines. We have to be able to say, for Black women in Georgia, maternal mortality and maternal health is an urgent crisis. And we also have to be able to say, and by the way, there are struggling white folks and struggling Black folks and working class white folks and working class Black folks who can be united by appealing to how fixing this healthcare crisis benefits us all. One of the greatest challenges that I am encountering right now as I seek to present a vision is how to both be true to myself, which is I'm at heart a universalist. I believe we're all human beings.
Yeah.
I believe that this world and human beings will create a world capable of living up to our highest ideals when we embrace our universal brotherhood and sisterhood as humans above all else. But I also believe and know that race is real and class is real, and that these are historically embedded, that they're reinforced by laws and institutions that govern our society, and that we can't ignore them by appealing exclusively to some idea that we're all one. We have to get real and speak plainly, as I said, about race and class. This is the tension in politics right now that I'm trying to navigate.
Police, John. I know I got a couple more questions before you get out of here. For police, I think personally, defunding the police is not an option. I think that without police, it'll be hard to maintain our communities. I do, however, know that there are cops that need to be, and according to what Trump was saying earlier, he technically wants to put all bad cops on the list, make sure they don't get hired again at other precincts, and really get rid of them ultimately. How do you feel about it? We just saw what happened here in Atlanta. And, it's heartbreaking. I mean, and I think what's more heartbreaking is that every fucking day a new video appears. I mean, it's to the point, like, we have to have, and then obviously see the race baiting stuff where you see, a white guy just killed 2 women and a child running around naked, choking people, swinging, he doesn't get shot. You see a white kid on mushrooms going to the whatever, pull the gun, shoots the gun and doesn't get shot. And then you see black
or
kids.
militiamen going into state capitals with loaded AR-15s, with the threat of violence, while a young black boy holding a toy gun is attacked in a park, right? I mean, it's
So where are we, and how are you fighting that? How are you fighting that?
The answer is
what are you doing? What are you gonna do?
The answer is not to defund police. The answer is to reform policing.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay, when we have an unjust system of laws, the answer is not to do away with law. The answer is to make laws just.
Right.
And laws need to be enforced justly. And so that's why I talk at the federal level about a new Civil Rights Act. And you want to talk about being plain spoken and direct and something that folks can understand in a historical context, a new Civil Rights Act. And among what that will do will be to establish national standards for policing, national standards for the use of force, hold officers and departments and prosecutors' officers and judicial authorities to standards of basic human, civil, and constitutional rights, and enforce those standards. So the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, which, by the way, is the same entity responsible for trying to enforce the Voting Rights Act, although it's been gutted. And that's why we need a new Voting Rights Act as well. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division will hold local law enforcement accountable where there's systemic racism and how they're going about their duties, or where there's brutality that violates these national standards. To me, that is a clear solution at the federal level, which is where I'll be representing Georgia. And again, I want to challenge my opponent to criticize that, as he has been. He's been saying that is somehow an attack on police. It's not an attack on police. What we need is effective police, humane police, and accountable police. And most people respect the police, as they should, and most police officers are good people. But there's clearly a problem in the culture of policing in America that goes beyond any one department. And the way that we begin to repair that is by holding people to higher standards. If you are armed and sworn to protect and serve, then I believe you should be held to a higher standard than your average citizen, not a lower one. And I think that most officers aspire to that same level of professionalism and are ready to join that effort.
I love that. And before we get out of here, we have a few more minutes. I want to do 2 questions. One is, how do we mobilize first-time voters, John? How do we get first-time voters? We have a whole bunch of new voters that are now 18. We have first-time voters that have never voted and know how crucial this time is to vote. What are we doing? I'm going to connect you, by the way, with the QC camp, because I need you and Little Baby to do something with that song. And then I also want to just start to plug you with all my friends in the industry so that they can help you amplify your message. But what are we doing about that?
So this has to be a bottom-up movement style effort this summer in Georgia. There is so much energy right now, as we've seen with yesterday's march and all of the protest activity and all of the social media activity, it needs to be channeled into the action that will yield change. And that is to go in November with so many folks registered to vote, so determined to vote no matter what obstacles the state of Georgia puts in their way, that with overwhelming strength we win these elections. Not for the sake of my political career, not for the sake of any one political party, but because it's a really clear choice in November. I think it's a really clear choice in November. And so we all have to take it upon ourselves to get folks in our churches and schools and places of work and in our families registered. And my campaign will be doing a lot to encourage that. We've got thousands of volunteers who are right now reaching out to thousands of voters and prospective voters literally every day to check on their status, make sure they know what their status is, make sure they have all their up-to-date info, and start making plans to vote in November. But it's not something that one organization can do by itself. It has to be a culture this summer of recognition that whatever doubts you have about the underlying political system, that whatever confidence remains to be built by candidates like me in your mind, the stakes are just too high to sit it out. We need to get registered because there's a lot at stake and everyone's got some personal skin in the game here. America needs to change course, and it needs to change course now.
No, phoenixes will rise from these ashes, my brother. I really feel that this time is the biggest time in my lifetime that change has to happen, and it has to be an effective change. And before my closing remarks, you had the opportunity, man, to, learn and study under John Lewis. John is, if anyone on this live has ever met him, is one of the most, his presence alone just gives you the feels, right? What's one of the biggest things you learned from John Lewis?
Well, from the stories that he told me of his time as a young man in the movement, I suppose it's put in perspective for me what it really means to struggle and put your life and your body on the line. And, people come up to me and ask me how I'm doing, and, whether running for office is difficult, and people have like sympathy for it, but it's not. This is nothing. This is nothing compared to walking across a bridge into dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs and people who are hitting you in your skull with the intent to fracture your skull and kill or permanently maim you. And so, I think that what my experience being close to Congressman Lewis opened up for me was just a deeper appreciation of the level of self-sacrifice and true danger that so many openly subjected themselves to fight for voting rights. And if he had to take that punishment 55 years ago, and he was willing to die so that Black people in the American South could vote, then the obligation on people like me and on all of us to overcome this system that still tries to keep Black people from voting is overwhelming. So I suppose that's how I'd reflect on the effect that Congressman Lewis had on me, Kenny.
I love that. One more Obama bobblehead for you. I want to tell you this and speak this into you, brother. I don't see color when I see your spirit, man. And I think that you have a natural gift to adapt and adjust right then and there in that moment. I love how you handled the question earlier when I brought back the race topic. I think people like you are necessary to bring us out of this dark time. And I just want you, man, to really, again, tap into the superpower of the layman term. Speak to these people, man. I loved how at the NAACP, sorry, rally yesterday, you came out and was like, look, I'll never know what it feels like to be in your skin. And I think those are the things, man, that will connect people, to you, your message, and ultimately the work that you're going to do for them. So salute to you, brother. I wish you the best, and crack that Uncle Nearest 1884 open when you get a chance.
I'll do that tonight. I appreciate you having me. Hope you don't mind me calling on you from time to time for your counsel privately. And I do want to just let everyone know, if they want to learn more, to check out the campaign at electjon.com, electjon.com. And y'all, we really have to build a culture around political change right now. So to everyone who's listening, who agrees that the stakes are high and that now is the moment, and that a younger generation has to step up, I look forward to doing it with you. I'll see you out there. And Kenny, I hope to return. Much love, sir.
Yeah, you have. I never offer my mentoring service or spiritual advisor advice unless I mean it. You got it anytime you need it, brother.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right.
Take care.
Soon. Peace, love.
All right.
One time for John. You guys got to follow him, man. If you haven't actually, let me give you his website for his company, man. It's very, very interesting. It's called Insights TWI. Go to the .com, man, and check it out. Very, very interesting young man. I have hope. I am hopeful for the future. I am hopeful with minds like that, people that actually get it and want to evoke change. He sees the America we want it to be. Tomorrow, very special guest, y'all. It won't be political. We're going to have some laughs. The dream is real. It's the Kenny Burns Show. Love.